Welcome everyone to State Museum Perspectives. I'm Beth Hager. I'm the Museum Director of the State Museum of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg. And today I'm really pleased to have a special guest we've been working with at the State Museum for the past several months. Dr. Alexandra Jones has been serving as a consultant to planning the State Museum's Sections of Archaeology's annual workshop conference. The archaeology workshops take place virtually via Zoom on Saturday, October 30th, 2021. We'll share a link to the conference info and registration later, but first let me introduce Dr. Jones to you. Dr. Alexandra Jones is a historical archaeologist and educator who is a professor at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. She is founder and chief executive officer of the organization Archaeology and Community, which is a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit that aims to increase awareness of archaeology and history. She worked on the PBS television program Time Team America, where she served as their field director of archaeology in 2013. Dr. Jones has 2 BA degrees in history and anthropology and an MA degree in history, all from Howard University. And she earned her PhD in historical archaeology from the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you, Alex, Dr. Jones, for joining us today. And first, I just wanted to start with, how did you get into archaeology? What inspired you? What particular aspects of archaeology got you interested in the field?
So I first became introduced to archaeology at Howard University as an undergraduate. Like many, the idea of learning about people, discovering history, culture excited me. I went on my first excavation while an undergraduate student in Chimchipnil, Mexico, and absolutely fell in love. It was a Mayan site. I worked along with Mayan people, having wonderful conversations each day, learning about their history, their heritage, local understanding of the things that were being uncovered, and just in partnership, being the first to uncover something in over 1,000 years. All of that excited me, and it's that love and passion that I bring today to the youth that I teach and work with.
What then led you to start Archaeology in the Community, and tell us what all that entails and what that organization does?
So Archaeology in the Community is an archaeology education nonprofit. I founded it 13 years ago while a graduate student at Berkeley. And essentially it became out of a need. While being a student in California, what I noticed is that Berkeley did a wonderful job of community outreach and going to local schools and students and teaching them about archaeology. Me being a child of the Smithsonian, one of the things that I noticed was we didn't have that same energy and involvement in the community in DC that I saw in Berkeley. So instead, what I did was I started doing all of my outreach in DC versus in California. And every semester I would fly home. And as I started it, what I saw was this huge excitement and kind of this galvanizing around this archaeology education, which wasn't before offered. And I recognized that there's this great need in the Mid-Atlantic region. So I started the nonprofit, and it's just been going ever since. We've continually grown. Though one of our first programmatic levels was educating youth, we've expanded to professional development and community archaeology as well.
Well, I want to come back to community archaeology in a moment, but just a couple of details. What age youth are you talking about? Who are you working with?
So we literally go as young as 4 years old in some cases, because we work with pre-K, all the way up to the extended learner. So we don't actually, we cover all age ranges. As long as you're interested in archaeology, we teach you.
Mm-hmm. Do you do this in conjunction with a public school, private school, or is it just a community-based activity? How do you recruit young people to work with you?
We're open to all. And so that's been one of our things. We're not limited to any particular group. And as a result, we've gone international quite a few times to work with youth in other countries
Oh, like
as
where?
well.
Where have you gone with that?
So we've worked in Belize, in Haiti, and then we also have a project in St. Croix right now.
Oh, wow. Well, what is, I mean, we see kids, young people get very excited about archaeology here at the State Museum. They're very interested in Indigenous peoples, Native Americans, and kind of an ancient history, if you will, more, prehistory. Um, you are working in prehistory, you're working in historical archaeology, perhaps. And how do you get them excited about that?
So we cover all archaeology.
Okay.
So pre-contact as well as historical, as well, I mean, literally all archaeology, underwater archaeology,
Mm.
European archaeology, Belizean, I mean, we literally cover the full gamut. And one of the things that we do is we partner with archaeologists who are specialists in different regions, in different countries, in different areas.
Mhm.
And just through those partnerships, we're able to educate students. So when we do projects based on the theme of the project, sometimes we have thematic archaeology clubs or camps. We work with specialists from different regions and we bring them in, which is also the wonder of Zoom. So in this past year, we've been able to work with more archaeologists internationally than we
Wow.
ever have before.
Hmm. What do you see? Give me an example of a project where you've seen kids get particularly excited. What again, what do you think inspires them?
So we're very big on tactile, making sure that kids get their hands dirty, but we're also big in explaining that archaeology isn't just excavating. So
Hmm.
most people, that's their vision. So it just depends. Everything we do, we make it so that it's hands-on. So we've done conservation activities where we conserve nails. I mean, most people would think, it's just a nail, but the students working with a conservationist to learn how to actually clean metal and what it looks like, that process. We partnered with labs. I think by far the most exciting that I've seen was we worked with archaeologists out of New Mexico for a project, and they brought in all of their specialists throughout the state to come in. And so for youth to be able to move back and forth and see different archaeologists wearing different hats and
Hmm.
all of the equipment that they're able to utilize was exciting. We also partner with Mount Vernon, and so students were able to actually excavate alongside of archaeologists. So they were super excited about that as well. So always kind of pushing the envelope and trying to find different ways where students can come into the archaeology environment and learn different things, but also learn that we do way more than just dig. And there's lots of different things that you can do. And I often tell my students that anything you can imagine, you can actually do within archaeology.
Mm. Well, I think you've really hit the nail on the head with a lot of times the attraction to the dig, the excavation, and there's so much more to it. The historical research, the conservation that you mentioned, the collections practices. That's really great to give them that total look, and then also that access to yourself and other experts. That's tremendous. Let's move to a related field is what you're really talking about, but the term community archaeology is a specific term. It's specific to a certain area of the field, and you are at the forefront of it in your work and the work that you are doing with Society for Black Archaeologists. Tell us about what is community archaeology?
So community archaeology is a field of archaeology that essentially is an extension of public archaeology. Most of us are familiar with public archaeology, and it
Public
goes beyond.
public archaeology, just to define that too.
Mhm. Okay, so initially you had public archaeology. When it first initiated was kind of an outcrop of the Park Service and the government saying that there are these spaces that we need to preserve for the public and that are important. But it was a very top-down kind of form of archaeology where the archaeologists were saying that this is important to the public and we're doing this work. Community archaeology kind of takes a step back and says that it's not okay for us as archaeologists to define what is important to the public and what the public wants to know, but instead, let's incorporate the communities in which these histories, these stories are important to, and bring them in on the process of archaeology. So having it where communities are literally involved in multiple steps throughout the archaeological process. So it's taking it and it's making it a partnership versus scientists kind of telling the public what is important in their history and their heritage, but adding them back into the actual process as organic intellectuals, as which many communities are. I mean, these are people who have lived in this area, lived in this environment, have had the oral traditions, the stories passed down. And now what we're doing is we're taking that knowledge base and we're asking them, based on this environment in which we're exploring, what would you like to know? What knowledge should we have and operate from in order to do this work as well?
And that's why we reached out to you, because our section of archaeology, our archaeologists are very interested in exploring this model, particularly in the greater Harrisburg area. And community archaeology, African American history through archaeology. And that's why we are doing the workshops that are coming up on October 30th, really that first step for us to start delving into the field and finding out more about it, and hopefully leading to some such projects in our area. And so let's just talk a bit about the workshops then. You're going to give a introduction essentially to community archaeology, and you have brought us a really great keynote speaker. In addition to, there are several great speakers on this program, but Cheryl LaRoche is a keynote speaker. Tell us about her and give us some background on her and what she's going to talk about.
So Dr. LaRoche is phenomenal. She's actually done a great deal of work in PA. She worked on the President's House project in Pennsylvania before, which was
Philadelphia.
Yes.
Philadelphia.
And that was a community project where pushing the envelope of having essentially a speaker's box where visitors to the site could ask questions of the archaeologists and can talk with the archaeologists and engage with them and ask questions and see what was going on and what's being, and it gave the public in real time option to be involved in the archaeology. So while it's being excavated, they're asking these hard questions of the archaeologists, which is challenging the way that they're thinking about this history. And then it was also exploring the history of the enslaved. Normally with presidents' houses, you're looking at the president. So kind of flipping this landscape, how we traditionally look at it, the questions we're asking, and allowing the community to be involved in this process as it's going about. Currently, she's also working with the Park Service in Baltimore, and she's working on a project with the Hampton site. And that has led her again to the wonderful state of Pennsylvania to do work, because what she found out were enslaved individuals who became free and emancipated ended up moving to Pennsylvania as well and starting communities. So she's done a great deal of work within the state overall, and looking specifically at African-American history, free African-American history and archaeology, but doing it in a community and engaged way.
And her title is Free Black Communities in Archaeology. So it sounds like she'll be drawing from that experience that she's been having at Hampton, which is a National Park Service site. You may have said that. It's an incredible site, and there are they did enslave people there, and there are uh, dwellings, are there not, there that are still extant, and it's pretty close to the Mason-Dixon line, and makes total sense as that you described that she's found that people that were uh, from there became free would go to Pennsylvania. It makes a great deal of sense, and so that's going to be exciting to hear her talk about that. Another person that you brought to us for this is from Montpelier.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
So we also have Matthew Reeves, and he runs the archaeology lab at Montpelier. And over the past few years, Montpelier has done a phenomenal job archaeologically looking at the enslaved community of that landscape. And so what they've redone is through the archaeology, they've actually recreated the enslaved quarters that are there. They've been able to talk about the stories of those who've been enslaved on the landscape and give faces and names back to people. So it's no longer just saying we had enslaved, but it's actually talking about the history and the heritage. And Montpelier has gone a little bit further and partnered with the descendants of the enslaved. So they actually have the descendants who are now intimately involved and have a say in what's taking place at Montpelier as well. And he was very integral in being on a committee that created a document looking at how do you include descendant communities in and when doing archaeology of African Americans. And so I think it gives a different perspective of not only looking at how can community work be done, but he's actually talking about the methodology of including that community and what are some of the methods that can be done through.
Well, that's a really great primer, essentially, for others and how to go about that. I might mention a couple of other participants. I'm not going to mention all the speakers, but Barbara Barksdale is a local Harrisburg resident who is going to be talking about the Hallowed Ground Project in Pennsylvania. She is very involved with honoring burial sites of Pennsylvania's United States colored troops from the Civil War. And she's well known in the Harrisburg community, and we're excited to have her on board as well. And there are several other talks about things that are specific to Pennsylvania in African American history and archaeology. We're really running across the state, projects across the state. So we're terrifically excited. We're disappointed that it has to be a Zoom conference. We had planned a hybrid conference in person and also online, but with the pandemic as it is, we thought it best to go back to the Zoom scenario so we all wouldn't be packed in our auditorium together. But that said, it's still going to be wonderful. All the same speakers, and you can spend as little or as much time that day, Saturday, October 30th, 2021. It is, as you can see on our screen, there is there's a page on our website, statemuseumpa.org, devoted to this where you can sign up. We're seeking, we're requesting a modest donation of $25, which is a suggested donation. It's also possible to pay as little or nothing for this too. We just want people to participate because we're so excited about the topic. We're so excited about the speakers in the conference. And I have to say, again, we have really enjoyed working with you, Dr. Jones, and learning so much more about this. It's just a great introduction for the State Museum to start going in this direction. And we thank you so much for leading us toward this. And I also want to recognize the members of section of archaeology. It's led by Dr. Kirk Carr. He's a senior curator, and he is keenly interested in this, and the whole team is especially. So We look forward to seeing you virtually next week again on October 30th, and all of your colleagues and others at the virtual table. And I look forward to meeting you in person sometime, because everything's been Zoom for us so far. So you're just down the road in Towson, so we don't want you to be a stranger here. So thank you, and everyone. We thank you for your attention, and please consider joining us for the workshops and for more Learn at Lunchtimes coming up on Fridays. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dr. Jones.
You're welcome. Thank you.